All right, so now with that, I'm excited about introducing our next presenter, which is none other than Gurbax Sahota, who is the president and CEO of the California Association for Local Economic Development, better known as CALED. And they've been an amazing partner for years, and so I'm really excited to have Gurbax herself come out and grace us with her presence and the information. So please welcome Gurbax Sahota.
Can't not hug George. All right, can you guys hear me okay? Yep, okay, awesome. Well, first of all, it's nice to see so many familiar faces. I thought I was losing my mind when I saw you sitting there because I'm used to seeing you in LA, but cool. For those of you that aren't familiar with CALED, we're the State Association for Economic Development, local economic development, so really focused on what's happening at the local level. We have over 900 members, primarily city and county staff that are working on economic development, similar to you all in the room. Also state partners, federal partners, nonprofit and private sector. We're one of the largest economic development associations in the country and the largest in California. Why that matters to you guys is that not only are we working on policy and tools and resources for you at the state and federal level, primarily focused on the state level, we're doing it with an eye to what you guys have told us you need. So heavily focused on local work, local priorities. So as we're talking to legislators, we're trying to make sure that the tools and resources we're talking about are the issues that matter to you, not necessarily that are just being discussed in theory at the state or federal level. So you guys are really important to us, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. I want to recognize a couple of folks real quick. We have a board member in the audience, Stephen Bader, so you guys are well represented in our leadership. And you've always had a strong role in our leadership in the past as well, so there's a lot of engagement from this area. We, as a staff, every year, usually every year, come together and give out an Above and Beyond award. And that's an award that we give to a member who's gone out of their way to help us provide services to the entire membership or do something that'll help make a difference for the membership. One of our first recipients of that award, it won't surprise you to know, is George Carter, who's hiding out again now in the back. But George, really appreciate the partnership. And also, we're connected to you guys in other ways as well. So if you're not familiar, CALED actually has 3 entities. Aside from our primary membership association, we have the California Enterprise Development Authority, which is a joint powers authority that does financing of projects. We've done a lot in this area, but what's of note to us and what's really exciting is a commercial PACE project that we're doing in Pittsburgh that's closing tomorrow. It's a new construction on a hotel in the city of Pittsburgh where the city is a partner. I don't think I heard a representative from the city of Pittsburgh as being here, but it's a big deal for us because we're financing the energy efficiency piece, the water efficiency piece, as well as the seismic portion of that building. So we expect to do a lot more of those types of projects, and as we do, if we're in your community, we'll certainly let you know that we're working on these. Oftentimes these projects, we can't announce them until they've actually closed because there's so much back and forth, as you guys know, in the negotiation of getting these financings closed. But we have done quite a bit here, and we're excited that we have this hotel project, and we'll share it with you when we can. Also, aside from CEDA, our financing arm, we have the California Academy for Economic Development. Some of you have attended our trainings, and this really speaks to what's happening locally, but from a statewide perspective. So I'm going to share with you a couple of trends that we've seen. We hear a lot about we need to train the next generation of economic developer. The challenge we've always had is the next generation of economic developer, the newest person that's come in, the person that's transferred from another department but might have years of local government or economic development experience? Is it someone that's coming from a totally different career set and now has to do economic development? So trying to figure out what each of those audiences need sometimes is really difficult. We've talked about mentorship programs, and it's really interesting to hear folks saying, I don't need a mentor. What I need is someone I can pick up the phone and call that I can trust when I have a question. So as an association, that's a challenge we're dealing with statewide, trying to figure out how we provide support. That said, our training programs are selling out. We have probably about 10 years ago, we started down the path of creating a California-specific economic development certification. This is really important to us. I mean, we hear folks talking about economic development not being a profession. And again, I'm wearing my state level hat, not your local conversations, but it's born out of what we're hearing from you guys as well. We want to make sure people understand there is a profession, there is curriculum. People need to understand what the role of an economic developer is and the value of economic development. So seeing the certification program do as well as it's been doing. In fact, we had our recent Keys to Successful Economic Development training. We try to keep it, because it's in a classroom setting with Fresno State, to about 40 folks so people can really engage. This year, it sold out at 85. We had to expand the venue, and we still have another 80 or so on the waiting list, so we'll be offering that twice next year. Following that is the Advanced Institute for Economic Development, where you really get into the weeds of learning how to do project finance and put real estate projects together. As I'm looking at Brett and Gabby, I should tell you, and Abraham as well, we've had several of you in the room, I think, that have gone through some of those trainings as well. Thank you for joining us, and I hope you find value out of them as well. But education for us is critical, whether it's new trends or tried and true programs. One of the things we talk to for a lot of our members is folks that have been around a while will see a business retention program or see another program and say, oh, that's not innovative. But for someone who's never done it, or a community that hasn't had that, it's absolutely innovative. So what's old is new. So there's a lot of good tried and true programs we want to make sure we share as well. Education's a big piece of what we do, not just educating professionals, but educating legislators. I'm going to try not to talk a lot about the legislature, but I might close with that, so something to maybe look forward to. A couple of other trends we're seeing, we're hearing a lot from local jurisdictions, challenges about budgets. With the ARPA funds drying up, how's economic development being funded? We thought we were going to have this challenge in 2020, and we created a lot of material around the value of economic development, but materials that you all could use. Because the other thing we're hearing, some communities love it when somebody from the outside comes in and talks to their leadership about economic development, which I'm happy to do. I get a lot of invitations to do that. But there's plenty of folks that are like, I'm hired as a professional economic developer. I want to deliver the message. Do you have pieces that I can use? If we can support you with that in any way, if that's a challenge you're having, Laura on our team can share resources with you. And certainly, again, we're happy to be in your communities alongside you to help educate your elected officials, not in place of you, because we do think it's important that as we're working in your communities, we're continuing to support the value that you all bring to your communities as well. So those are big pieces. The trends about financing, hyper-focus on local projects. I think, because we're local economic development, we pay attention to the local projects anyway, but what we're hearing about it is different from the perspective that it's a very local focus, like downtown or this corridor or specific areas. It's not, I know there's been a big push for regionalism, especially when you see the Jobs First program. I did hear that I know they had a call a couple of weeks ago at the state level to talk about what's happening with that program. I also know that not all of our jurisdictions are plugged into it. You guys are pressured. Oftentimes there's just one of you, maybe there's two, and maybe you have 2 or 3 titles while you're doing economic development as well. So to be part of a regional process makes it really difficult because you need to focus locally. That's the stress we're seeing across the state in the profession. So if you're experiencing that, you're not the only one. If you're not experiencing that, you are really lucky. You're really lucky. And then let me talk about one more piece as it relates to a shift that we're seeing in economic development. If you were at our conference, and I know some of you were in Santa Rosa, I was joined by Secretary Stuart Knox, the Labor Secretary, and we were talking about trends in economic development even back then. And one of the comments that a practitioner made was, it's not enough to be a generalist anymore if you're in economic development. You have to be able to be specific, have technical skills. Those technical skills are around site assembly. They're around how do you make sure that there's places that are developed where your businesses can thrive. That is a challenge that we're seeing across the state. Again, the challenge we're having with the legislature obviously is the lack of trust sometimes with jurisdictions. Cities get called out a lot in that conversation for not doing enough on housing. Regardless of where you're at on that, that conversation colors legislation, it colors the conversation that happens with legislators around economic development tools as well. Some of you might have been tracking Assembly Bill 98. It's the warehouse restriction bill. One of the most difficult pieces of watching that bill go through the Senate, while we saw so many senators on both sides and as well as Assembly members oppose that bill, what you heard from the local government chairs on the Assembly and the Senate side were comments like, local government has failed. We've continued to pick economic development over housing. So that's what's bubbling up at the state level and kind of the wins we're fighting against or maybe addressing at the same time as we're figuring out how do we get tools to support you. The most important tool right now that we're looking at is really on the site assembly side and the local real estate development side, and that's tax increment financing. Some of you might have heard of EIFDs. Have you? Enhanced Infrastructure Financing Districts, awesome. Okay, so those are priorities for us to make sure we protect them, make sure that you guys have the tools that you need to be effective with those. There's 30 that have been formed in this state, and there's at least another 30 that are in process. And that's important because now what we're going to see is on the operational side, do you have challenges? Do you have need for support? The legislation's really vague. We think that's great because we think it gives you a lot of flexibility. Your attorneys probably don't like it so much and are hoping that the legislature will put rules or more language in that saying you can do this. But any time that you're taking that tool back, looking for that permission to do one specific thing, know that it gets opened up to a lot more. And so those are some of the big things that we're watching. And I think I just want to close and talk to you a little bit about legislation and the legislative environment as we're starting the 2-year session. There's going to be a lot of change, you guys know, not just at the federal level. We're expecting at least 25–30% change in the legislature as well. So we'll be looking to educate legislators that we know are going to impact critical committees. We're a limited staff, we're limited resources, just same as you guys. So we'll be looking at those that have the most influence on the bills that are going to go through that you all probably care about. What we will also do is continue to send you information in hopes that you're talking to your electeds about what you're doing. This is what economic development looks like in your district. I think that's really critical because we can say so much at the state level. I'll tell you right now, your stories are way more impactful than ours when it comes to legislation. So I hope that you guys do take the time to meet with your legislators, invite them to stuff, make sure, I mean, it's great that I know you do always for this event. It's great that you guys have that opportunity to be close and really show what's happening. And the final piece is, we are your association. We only exist to support economic developers and local economic developers primarily. I mean, we're fortunate to have great state partners, and I hope you get a chance to talk about Outsmart Disaster when you're up here. But our focus is helping you all be successful, and whether it's looking at what's happening at the national level or the state level, we're always looking for opportunities. And if you guys see one that we missed, don't be shy about letting us know. But if you also see something that we're doing that really aligns with your work, let us know too, because we need your impact or your input, because without that, you know, we can't be relevant, we can't represent you in the way that is really right for you all. And again, we only exist to support you. So thank you for the invitation always. I'm so sorry I couldn't make it last year, but really glad to see so many of you this time. So thank you.
Were there any questions? Okay, hold on.
Trying to make a run for it. That was quick.
Yeah, is there a list of all of the ACE certified professionals, and what's the difference between the ACE certification and the IEDC certification?
That's such a good question. I'm glad you asked that question. So yes, there is a list of folks that are certified. It's on the Academy website. That's edacademy.org. And you can see those that have passed the certification, that have met not only the experience requirement, have gone through the courses, and then sat for the panel exam. So that's on the website. The big difference for us, I'm going to be candid because, again, you know, we're your association. we felt like IEDC certification wasn't serving the membership. A lot of you all couldn't travel at the time that we were pushing for all hours. Also, the classes were too broad, like they weren't specific to California issues. Like you're in a real estate class, you need to be able to talk about CEQA and some of the things that are unique to California. So some of the challenges that we face in California, maybe everybody faces them, I don't know, but I think they're unique. And so we wanted to speak to that, but we wanted to speak to it in a way that we've structured it so that just somebody with a general interest in economic development could maybe take the first class, but they won't be able to take the second class because there's an experience requirement to be able to be part of it. So broad education, but then pushing towards a certification that you can attain faster than you can IEDCs, but it's California specific. That was the biggest piece, the California specific piece. You're welcome. Thank you for asking the question.
Any other questions? All right, well, thank you, Gurbax, for your presentation and your partnership. Appreciate you. Yes. And by a show of hands, how many of our attendees have actually taken either the Keys Course 1 or 2? Hello. Yes. Yes, and so I was able to participate in our last session in August with some of my colleagues, Brett and Cassava, and it was really, 1 is really good because it gets you exposure, but 2 is really gets into it, like Gurbax says, so, just have your breakfast in the morning so you have your brain food, okay, because it's really good, though, very useful information and training. I highly recommend it to anybody interested in pursuing a career in economic development.